Marcia's always been much more than a colleague, and I consider her a dear friend. And I love this picture so much, I just had to put it in here. And I'm sorry, Marcia, but I had to. Okay, let's begin. Today we are going to talk about making a new frame for our panel from a cassone, the race of the Palio in the streets of Florence, made in 1418 by Giovanni Francesco Toscani. You can see that this simple black strip frame needs improvement and could benefit with a more decorative gilded border, especially considering it is the only frame in the medieval galleries lacking a proper frame. The current setting could be improved and the back wall could be elevated with something more fitting for the galleries. I always felt that this corner was lacking something. In this presentation, the topics we will cover are selecting a frame profile, pastiglia techniques, woodworking, the frame internship, the process of water gilding, creating a patina for a convincing feeling of age, and installation in our galleries. A cassone or a marriage chest held significant importance as a piece of furniture traditionally given to the bride. Typically positioned at the foot of the bed, it served as a place to hold her personal belongings. Many of these cassone chests did not survive intact, but the painted decorated panels did, and they were displayed on the wall like a painting would. Back in 2015, frame historian Lynn Roberts wrote an essay about our Toscani. A little bit about Lynn. She is one of the leading and most knowledgeable frame experts out there. She runs the Frame blog, an online magazine for articles and reviews about antique and important frames, and I highly recommend everyone check it out if you're into frames, and just search the Frame blog. She writes many of the surviving cassone, which he is associated with, are decorated with pastiglia or aggetti, the softly fluid shallow ornamentation created by painting on or dripping liquid gesso. The Cleveland panel is no exception to this. It means that any form of frame must take into consideration the four corner panels decorated in this way. She goes on to say, the Cleveland painting has been shorn of its raised moldings, which would itself have been bordered at the top with another band of gesso ornament. It would also give it back a measure of the decorative context in which it was housed in its original setting. The gesso decoration would echo and amplify the existing elements at the four corners in the same way the complete cassone chest would have done. Given that the Cleveland painting has lost its original context, the best way to display it would be to return it to something like this. She made this Photoshop from a period cassetta frame with raised gesso ornament on the flat inner panel. I was very pleased to see this solution. I just loved how it wasn't a tabernacle style frame. Most of the cassone panels I see are. So after reading this, the curators and everyone else agreed that this would be a great transformative setting for our galleries. This is an example of a tabernacle style frame that I was referring to. And this houses our Salaio that hangs in Gallery 117. This frame is also bordered with a pastiglia design that is different type than the one that we made. The pastiglia seen here is a gesso paste that was pushed into molds that would then be applied to the frame, as opposed to the method we used by dripping liquid gesso directly onto the frame. So with no funding in sight and none ever expected to be, I was asked to see if we could make one in-house and to talk with our cabinet maker about a corner sample to start with. So he made this, replicating Lynn Roberts' Photoshop rendering. It's important to start with a corner sample. This ensures that all of the dimensions and ratios of the moldings are appropriate and harmonize with the painting. Some adjustments were necessary, especially on the inner molding shoulder height and the thickness of the backside edge, along with a few other minor tweaks. These subtle alterations resulted in enhancing the elegance of the profile. So Bob Bocic, our cabinet maker, crafted the frame from poplar wood. Here he is shaping the raised moldings. The flat inner panel was constructed using a half-lap joint in the corners, while the raised moldings were mitered. This type of construction method is historically accurate. Here he has constructed a back build, which will not be gilded, so he made it out of walnut wood. After sealing it with shellac, the beauty of the walnut grain really shines through. This addition of weight and depth to the frame significantly enhanced its impressiveness, elevating it to the level of a finely crafted piece of furniture. Now I'd like to introduce to you my last summer intern, Nat Lennington. Nat is a fine art student from the Cleveland Institute of Art, majoring in sculpture and expanded media. This internship was funded through the Studio Arts Intern Program, founded by Agnes Gund. It provides opportunities for skilled college students with financial need to experience arts professions with paid internships. It's an incredible program, and Nat was my 4th intern with them. With all of my interns, I usually start out with a water gilding workshop. It's a 2-week program so that they can have a comprehensive understanding of the entire gilding process and practice and experiment on sample boards before the main project begins. Here's a detail of one of his sample boards, where he is learning the process of water gilding and laying gold leaf. Wood frames that are water gilded always start out with gesso. Rabbit skin glue and calcium sulfate or carbonate are stirred slowly in a double boiler on low heat. This is the foundation for water gilding. Here is Nat sifting the chalk into the warm rabbit skin glue. It is important that all ratios of water, glue, and chalk are measured precisely. You want to stir slowly in one direction to reduce the chance of creating air bubbles. It's very similar to cooking. Next comes bowl, which is rabbit skin glue and gilder's clay. It is the second layer in the process, and it creates a soft cushion that the gold leaf will lay on. The clay needs to be ground down with a glass slab and muller to make sure there are no hard lumps in it. The bowl is stirred slowly on low heat in a double boiler. We used red over yellow. It's kind of a classic Italian color scheme. A lot of times you would just see red on that early of an Italian, but we liked the red over the yellow because it created this nice orange, fiery kind of look under the gold. The composition of a water gilded frame. This slide shows all of the layers in the process. You have your wooden molding, the gesso layer, the yellow bowl, and then the red bowl. The gold leaf dries a satin matte finish, and burnishing creates a high luster, mirror-like finish, and then different levels of toning and distress. The gesso that is used for the pastiglie ornament is slightly thicker than your normal gesso. This is achieved by simply adding in more chalk into the mixture. Syringes were used for achieving the fluid design. We tried every single type of syringe. The best was the one way over to the right with the bent tip, but all of them would work. So the most expensive one to the left was not the best one. The $1 one on Amazon to the right. And I think it was used to like feed your hamster like medicine or something. And it was clearly the winner. It is believed that historically, some type of piping bag was used to achieve the fluidity, similar to decorating a cake with icing. I did try dripping it off of a brush at first with multiple passes, but I could not achieve the perfect fluidity of the design. The temperature of the gesso is very important too. The sweet spot is about 120 degrees. it is too cold, it doesn't flow right, and if it is too hot, it will disperse and puddle. I took an online refresher class with Master Gilder Charles Douglas. He taught me a lot of his tricks, especially about the temperature of the gesso. You can see in this slide, we are finally achieving it. Many days of practicing the technique. Here's another picture to show you how many practice boards that were made. We became like robots. It was just like muscle memory after a while, because I think we needed to get the confidence. Here is Nat on his first day practicing on a sample board. I needed him to learn that syringe and the way the plunger at times would stick. I needed him to become more confident with the gesso as a material and know when to reheat it. This video shows how slow the gesso needs to be laid with the syringe. It was a slow process that we eventually became quicker at, but not by much. So if we stayed within the lines, the goal was that my hand would match his hand, because I did half the frame and he did half the frame. The fear was it was going to look like two people did it. So we painstakingly traced that design and then we stayed within the lines. And if we figured if we just stayed within the lines, our hands would match. And they did. And that's why we had to go so slow. There was no expression at all. There was no going outside of the lines or getting creative at all with this. Once dried, the pastiglia is water polished to smooth out any imperfections. It is rubbed with a slightly damp rag. And you have to be careful, because if you rub too much and then you wipe it too thin, I mean, there's like a shoulder height that you want to keep. Here's a closer detail. Now we are ready and prepared to gesso the frame. The wood is first sized with rabbit skin glue, and then a milk coat of thin gesso is applied. I prefer to apply 8 coats of gesso, although much of it will be sanded off. It is crucial to be careful and not sand so much, as you risk burning back down into the wood, and you would have to re-gesso those areas and then re-sand those areas. Here's a detail of the wet gesso after applying the 8th coat. This is the dried gesso before sanding, and you can see the brush marks. And the gesso after sanding. Gesso putty is made to repair or fill in any imperfections left in the gesso layer. It is created by adding more chalk to your liquid gesso until it reaches a putty-like consistency. Now it is sanded until perfectly smooth. This is the most important step in the preparation. Any problems in the surface will be more noticeable and magnified after gilding. That's why we use a raking light during sanding. We traced the design using graphite transfer paper. Here's a slightly closer detail. We've completed our practice on the sample boards and now begin the application using the syringe on the gessoed frame. This is an in-process picture. The bright white on white is so hard to see, so again, we shut down the overhead lights and just use the raking light so we can see it more clearly. And here's the detail of the wet pastiglia. The ornament is now complete, and we couldn't be more pleased. We accomplished it all in one day. It took us longer to transfer and trace the drawing than it did to use the syringes with the decoration. And here is another angle. Next, the first coat is yellow bowl. This is brushed on over the gesso and the pastiglia. You want at least 5 or 6 coats of bowl on the areas to be burnished. 4 coats of yellow bowl were applied first to the entire frame. And here's the detail after it has dried. And then 2 more coats of red bowl to the areas to be burnished. And here is another angle. It's my favorite when it looks like this, and then you have to cover all that red and yellow up. It looks pretty stunning when it's in this. So when the whole thing is yellow, and on tops of the gesso, on the pastiglia, we would just dry brush kind of very carefully the red and kind of skim it across the tops of that pastiglia. And it would always go down to the lower level, but it doesn't matter because it all gets covered up. I wanted to include a picture of the frame lab. It's a great space. All of the tables are on wheels and everything is mobile. Notice the Photoshop printout of the new frame is above the cabinets there for us to refer to. Gilding begins. We started with the inner moldings first. You always want to gild downhill. You don't ever want water to drip onto your freshly laid gold. It will stain it, so you always have to kind of prop your project up and let the gravity take the water away from the newly gilded area. Here's a video of Nat laying gold. And he's got that flick of the wrist, which is a little important to get that leaf to come off the brush. And here's another one. Burnishing should begin around 3 hours after gilding, up until the next morning. The longer you wait, the more it dries out, and it makes it much harder to burnish. It's good practice to only gild what you can burnish in the same day. And a lot of people ask me these questions about this, and first of all, you will be able to burnish this gold indefinitely forever. You will, but it would be very difficult and a lot of physical pushing down, and it hurts your wrist and your shoulder after a while. So you're better off just burnishing it the same day or the very next day, and you won't have that fatigue building up in your arm because it happens. It happens all the time. And here's another detail of the inner molding before burnishing. Agate burnishers. You can see that they come in many shapes and sizes to match the contour of the moldings. Burnishing compresses the gold into the bowl and the gesso, and in return, you get a mirror-like shine. You can see the difference between the unburnished and burnished sections. When the gold dries, it is a satin matte finish, and after burnishing, it becomes a high-gloss mirror-like finish. The burnished sections have a deep, darker look to the gold, while the unburnished sections are more pale and bright. This slide shows the gold leaf overlap. You want to overlap about 3/16 of an inch. These ley lines will show through when the toning and distress happens. A detail after the excess gold is skewed. You can see the inner molding is burnished to a high luster, and the outer raised molding is still a satin matte that has been burnished yet. This slide shows after the raised moldings were gilded and burnished. We continue gilding on the inner flat panel ornament section. Me and Nat continuing to gild. He was with me for 10 weeks. We did this amazing project, and there's like one picture of us together, and I had to put it in this presentation because either he took pictures of me or I took pictures of him. Here's a picture of the gilded side edge. Sometimes the side edge is just painted a golden ochre color, but we wanted to wrap the entire frame with gold leaf. It was just a little extra time and money, and I convinced them to agree to that. All the moldings and raised ornament are burnished, while the flat is kept matte. This shows contrast and gives it depth. It was so bright, it was hard to look at for long periods of time, so we had to dim the lights. It was like jewelry. I remember getting like a headache, or I just couldn't see it. You're looking at this thing and you're trying to critique it for quality control, and I could not even look at it for long. It was, the light is just bouncing right back in your eyes. And here's a detail. And you can notice the burnished raised ornament is a little darker than that pale flat panel, so that's why the flat panel is not burnished. And here's another example of that. So now we brought the cassone panel in and prepared to fit it into the new frame. We need to gauge the level of tone. The new gold is too bright, and we need to tone it down to match the gilded corners of the panel. The goal is to make it look natural. The frame should complement and never overpower the painting. Toning begins by rubbing the gold with rotten stone, pumice, and cotton. This will abrade and thin the gold layer to expose the bowl colors below. We also use steel wool and make small scratches in the gold. Creating a feeling of age that is convincing is probably the most difficult part of this whole process. Everything we do here will show through at the end. So you're kind of working blindly. And it's good to work on these sample boards to understand how far you have to abrade the gold. Because once you put the tone on, everything changes. Everything gets very dark, very fast. And the gold that you think you still have left doesn't exist anymore. So the sample boards, I would recommend anybody who wanted to gild, just play around first and experiment. By flicking small water droplets and then immediately wiping it, we'll remove gold and add stains. We are building the patina. You can see that the red bowl and the ley lines are starting to show through. Once the gold rub is complete, we shellac the frame to seal it and protect it. And that's because if you ever made any kind of mistake with the tone on top, you will be able to take it off without ruining your gold layer. A lot of people don't like this shellac layer, and sometimes I don't use it either. But on something this big, this is a major project, we don't want to go backwards and start to restore our replica frame. We use an assortment of tools like razor blades, wire brushes, hammers, and other tools to add scratches and make dents. It's good to not use the same tool too many times because you don't want a pattern to develop. So we had ice picks and chains and pliers and hammers and all kinds of different shaped abrasive materials, and a rock. Like you just go out to the circle and grab, or the oval, and grab a rock. And you grab a bunch of these rocks, and one of the tricks is if you grab a pebble, and then with another rock, you use that rock as the dent maker, and then you can keep moving that pebble. You keep throwing that pebble away, get another pebble. You'll never have the same dent twice, and that's the goal, because the human eye picks up on that. The tone is made up by layering liquid asphaltum, casein, and oil colors as needed. We moved into the spray booth to get ready for the liquid asphaltum glaze. Here's a video showing the liquid asphaltum glaze go on. The asphaltum is mixed with mineral spirits and is the first coating to go over the shellac. And that's why we had to bring it into the spray booth, because we had excellent fume extraction in there. Here's a detail before it is wiped. Liquid asphaltum has this amazing translucent amber quality to it that works very well over any kind of gilding. So after the asphaltum, it is ready for a casein wash. I mix raw umber and raw sienna to make a greenish gray brown. It goes on very thin and wet and is removed with large stipple brushes. You have to work very fast. You can already see how much it's knocked down from the first, after it was burnished. Casein is used because it dries matte and it has a dusty appearance. Here are some details. The dents, the scratches, and the abrasions are filled in with the tone. Here's another detail. I love the small gesso loss on the corner, and at first I was going to repair it, but we left it. It was stable. We were trying for a convincing feeling of age. So now the panel is fitted into the frame, and at first I thought this could work. I worked closely with Gerhard Lutz, curator of medieval art, and Dean Yoder and Juliana Lee, our paintings conservators. Basically everyone and anyone I could get to critique it. Here's another detail. But the tone is not dark enough to match the gilded corners. It is much too bright and it needs more tone. So I did a test with burnt umber oil colors this time, just to the bottom right corner to darken it. I switched chemistry. So my first was alcohol-based, and then it was water-based casein. And then now it was, if I used water-based casein, I would have basically rejuvenated it and took it all off. So I just switched back to oil paint instead, so that first layer of water-based casein would stay. I had another meeting with Gerhard and Dean, and you can see that the darker burnt umber is what it needs. So back to the bench to finish it, and this was very difficult for me because I did not want to disturb all of the fragile layers of tone that were already laid down, and I did not want it to look too heavy-handed. Well, all was well, and it's complete. I really need to single out Dean Yoder for his help guiding me through this last stage. It was a running joke that day that he was my tone therapist. And Marcia can picture the whole thing. I know she can. And here's another corner detail. This slide shows how distressing the gold and applying thin layers of shellac, asphaltum, casein, and oil paint can build a patina. We're now getting ready to swap the frames for the last time. A lot of questions that people have asked me were how many leaves of gold and how much did it cost? So I did keep track, and there was 296 leaves of 23 karat gold, which cost $710. The wood, the gesso, the bowl, the miscellaneous items like the syringes and everything else cost around $475. And the frame totaled about $1,200 in materials. It took us 29 working days to complete, but it has been years in the making. This is the back of the panel, which is held in with mending plates. And there's that rare walnut back build that not many people will see except for us. But it is important to make the back look good too. That's why I applaud Bob for choosing the walnut. Because normally he would make it out of poplar, and I would stain it to try to make it look like walnut, and I didn't have to do anything to it except shellac it. And there's something really special about the back of this painting. What happened? Don't look. Oh yeah. So, because here's a closer look at the worm-eaten wood. So we put it back on the easel one last time just to make sure we didn't need to do anything to it now it's on the cart, ready to be rolled into the galleries for installation. I put this in because look at how small it looks in the grand open space of the atrium. It's kind of funny because it's not a small painting. It's not a big painting, but it's kind of funny. Here's our art handlers, Joe Blazer and Jesse, installing it in Gallery 117A. Now that corner in the galleries looks like this. I think it did transform it, and I couldn't be more pleased. I love how the Salayo panel and the cassone under it are like an arrow pointing to it, and I love this picture. The before and a reminder of what it used to look like in the after. And I like going back and forth because it's kind of fun to do that, but yeah, I think the black frame had no business ever being there. So it is now hanging. So if you get a chance, make sure to go see it. The photos are nice, but it's much better in person. I really want to thank you all for coming and for allowing me to share this project with you. If there are any questions, I'd like to take them now.
First, thank you so much. And you've kind of made a conservation talk almost like a thriller. I mean, I found myself very anxious as you were going through these steps to getting to that incredible result. One thing I wanted to ask was, with all the choices of woods, why have you settled on poplar as the wood of choice for the base for what you did?
I think it's like a couple reasons, because I always thought a lot of those Italian frames were made out of poplar. It depends on the year and the region and what was abundant, because that's what they would have used. Also, when you're covering something with gesso in a gilded finish, there would be no reason to ever use walnut or mahogany or like any of the beautiful harder woods. You know, there's something about poplar. It's the softest hardwood there is, but there's something about the way the gesso wants to stick to it. Like, you're never going to have a delamination problem, really. It's cheap, it's readily available, and we're going to cover it up anyway. Now, if some elements were going to be left raw wood, and if it was parcel gilt, you know, it wouldn't be poplar. It would be walnut or something, you know, depends on the region still. I don't really have the answer, except poplar is really easy to work with, and it's cheaper. And you're never going to see any of it, right? Actually, on that corner there, I had a gesso loss. You do see it, you know. But there's so much tone, there's so much darkness on that, yeah.
Thank you, that was wonderful. Often when we're working on paintings or people bring them into our studio, a painting that's been hanging for a long time in the usual orientation, the bottom part of the frame is really dirty. What do you do about that? Or
a lot of times it's more than dirty too. It's a lot of times the gold is abraded off, it's gone. You either live with it and keep it, or I can paint a little bit with the mica powders. You know, mica powder's never gonna match gold leaf. Depends on what it is. I hate to re-gild the frame entirely. One of the best tricks though in the world is just flipping the frame and letting that be the top edge, and now it lives in shadow. And now your bottom edge used to be the top, and I've done that to a couple frames. It is, you know, water gilding is the only thing that's going to really hurt water gilding is water. It's going to remove it, and it's been thought that the fact that if the cleaning person had a damp rag and year after year after year kept dusting it, it would take the gold off. But you're right, that just a couple years of dust, I mean, I can even say in my house, okay, does something to the gold. like it's uncleanable after a while. It impregnates it or something where, imagine 100 years, imagine 500 years. It's crazy. I talked to Gerhard about making the bottom worse than the top, and there's something kind of about a replica frame, or you want to make it live in harmony with the rest of the galleries and the rest of its family, and look you don't want it to stand out. But if you go too far with trying to, we don't ever want to be accused of fooling anybody's eye either. This is not original, you know. But Gerhard was against doing that, taking the bottom rail a little bit darker and different, because sometimes it causes so much character, it distracts from the painting. Like, I love those damages. You know, I think that the frame, there's ugly damages and there's beautiful damages. And sometimes we'll talk about with the curators, like which ones do you want to be fixed? Because you shouldn't fix them all. You need to keep some character to the frame. And some of the gouges or losses, you just stabilize them and you live with it because it's part of its life. Now, if something was really distracting and it was hideous, then you fix that, I think, you know, and you have the discussion with the curators. Yeah, it's a tough one. Yes.
You bring something to mind that I'm thinking about today, and also the other lectures we've heard. We are so kind of focused on the skill, but it's so important to recognize the judgment, because the use of those skills through the experience of judgment, that's usually what makes all the difference.
Yes, and I think you have to fail a lot to get good. Like, this is the type of process. I've been doing it for, I don't know, 27 years or something like that. But, you know, you have to make your mistakes. Some of the best frames that I think I made were ones where I took it too far, and I had to repair them, meaning regild areas, because talk about a convincing feeling of age. Now it looks like 3 hands have been in on it. You can never really match your tone again. You get really close, but what it does is it creates like this uneven quality. And sometimes I think it's good to destroy it and then bring it back to life again, because that's what's gonna make. If it was up to me, I would have taken that down even more. I probably wouldn't have went as dark, but I would have showed a lot more of the red bowl. But we work together as a collaboration with the curators, and my goal is just to please them, right? If the curators are happy, you know, because, you know, it's really weird, because I made a frame in 2018 for the Savoldo painting, and there was a different curator that's not there anymore. And they told me to stop. They didn't want like hardly any red showing. So we just stopped. And then now that person's gone. We have a new curator of European paintings, and they said, and the Savoldo gets hung on Monday. So Dean goes, Dave, this is our chance. Like, we can go ahead and let's beat this frame up and destroy it. And how long do you think it'll take? It's always about time, right? And it's like, I think it's gonna take 3 or 4 hours. We'll just do it. And it took me 2 6-hour days. It took me 12 hours, but I did it. And I just attacked it. I completely attacked this frame and kind of destroyed the frame, but it looks so much better. Marcia, go down where the lippy is. Lippy's coming out, and the Savoldo goes where the round lippy is. Check it out, because I really put a hurting on that frame, and I did make the bottom much red, more red, and really dirty. I got a lot of character now.
Thank you.
Thank you.